do in a bar if you're just standing there, casually speaking to someone.
Yeah.
Are you speaking right now in a similar fashion as you would do in a bar? If not, then, either you choose not to do that and say, okay, I'm going into presentation mode, which Henrik is great at, and he does great presentations. I'm sure you do as well. Or you choose to go like casual, I'm doing like bar type talking, and then you speak in a different way. I'm trying to do more bar speaking.
Another angle, is your favorite TIC words changing? Because I can almost go back in my head and this is so 1990s. Then everything was this word, and now I have a new word that I can't stay away from in 2022. So I can consciously know, and this is a TIC, right? I'm overusing it, so it's the impact in communication is lessening, and I can clearly see that I'm influenced by something, or I inspire, or something has taken me to a new level of understanding in some topic, and all of a sudden, typically, there's a new TIC word that comes around.
Did you use that today? You had a long day today, right?
Yeah, and this is the high point of the day. Yes, being here with you, having this conversation. I had a wonderful day. I don't live in Stockholm, so
where are you from, by the way?
I live just south of Malmö. So that's where I have my home and family. Yeah. And so whenever I come up to Stockholm, I usually try to kind of make the best out of being here. So I've had a wonderful day, just filled with a lot of great conversations, I would say. I started off with being at Stockholm University and presenting and talking about, okay, how do we look upon immersive technologies like AR and VR and having ethics in mind? Yes, how can we relate to that kind of new technology and see that we design and make it come to life in a way that we don't create negative consequences, and see kind of how can we put that into practice? How can we test that out and in a controlled way and see how can we start learning about this in practice?
So you met students?
Yeah, exactly. So it's part of our master's course in creative and immersive technologies.
Oh, really?
Is this an engineering?
Yep, it's part of part of the DSV, so the computer science part of Stockholm University. And then kind of that continued into discussions of being engaged in their PhD program and seeing how to really bring in the topic of ethics, but not ethics like something esoteric or theoretical, but actually practical. Like, how do we make decisions? Yeah, right. How do we make concrete things, and what happens then? Ending up meeting up with a fellow colleague and grabbing a coffee and talking more ethics and how to do that at scale.
One of your colleagues at your current?
No. Old friend here from in Stockholm, and then ending up also meeting the Swedish government and talking about, okay, how does all these regulations impact the reality of an enterprise, and how would we in the best way move forward? So regulation around whether that is AI or IoT, how can we actually see that as a wake-up call of seeing, okay, we need to be responsible. How can we gear up our processes and keep control of things, while most importantly also, I think, to not be hindered by bureaucracy.
Yeah. By bureaucracy or by also regulation, I guess. I mean, you want to promote innovation, I guess, as well.
Yes, exactly. And I think the case is that regulation should steer away from the most negative impact of things. Yeah. It should stay away from things that will actually infringe or create negative impact on humans and society. That is the purpose of it, and it should create transparency and predictability. Hopefully that's like push for standards, so we can grow in maturity. But at the same time, where do we create room for innovation? Where do we create room for development of these novel technologies?
And how do you experiment and explore and learn in order to better understand what it really means?
Yeah, exactly. How can we put it to the test and see what it means in reality when it hits the context of when? So we have the high risk area of recruitment.
So so meeting up with people at the government was, regeringskansliet in Swedish, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So part of the Department of Digitalization and Infrastructure, and seeing.
Do they have anyone sort of in particular, like spearheading?
Yep.
Ethics, AI ethics.
We focus upon specifically, I would say, the AI Act, and the AI Act has some embodiment of.
So there is a
ethics.
go-to person for AI Act questions in regeringskansliet.
Yes, there are a few of them, and and exactly, and I think that it's positive that they take that seriously and want to promote the idea. And what I was really happy about from that conversation, and I think that's hopefully something we'll be kind of touching upon today also, is that how can we have a focus upon outcome? What happens with these new technologies, rather than having a very much focus upon the technology in itself.
That's music to my ears.
Don't steal the thunder for the whole show now, because this is sort of the punchline in the end of the show.
We need to add that kind of teaser,
you told
right?
who the murderer was. You just said it. I'm joking. No, it's perfect, but it's a problem. How can we have an argument when we're all on the same side here? We need to try that anyway. I'm joking.
I'm very glad to hear that. And then you had a discussion about, for the regeringskansliet or the Swedish government about, how to, or what was really the topic? Well, we were trying to speak about the opportunities, the ethics of it, the hindrance, the innovation. What was really the core message?
Is, I think the main thing is that we're having just a great conversation about what are the key focus areas? How does one look upon these regulations? Just specifically, are they good or bad? Yeah. Are they kind of contribute with something positive to the context of society? And I think there we possibly is a different voice in the context, because we see their greater movement in the benefit of humans are good.
But I think you said it before. I mean, it's very much important to have a conversation with the regulators. How will this impact, and in what way, what consequences does this have for enterprise, has for business, has for startups? Yes. So I guess you were talking about, because you do something that looks good on paper until you follow the chain of consequences to what it really means, how we develop our businesses. Exactly. So I think that sort of impact conversation, I guess you had today a bit.
Exactly, and I think that we also need to see, we have an opportunity to actually work efficiently. How we can't expect to be innovative and modern and utilize 21st century technology and then have a 19th century process to control things. We need to kind of be able to work with how to make things efficient, so it leaves room for development and the use of it.
I think you said it very nicely before we started, and we're very innovative and trying to find efficient ways to use technology. Then the question is, how can you make ethics, be properly implemented? And I think, if we can make progress in ethics in the same way as we make progress in technology in some way, actually talking about how to make it happen, not necessarily, just by regulating it, but actually enabling technology for improving ethics, and just focusing on how to make it happen. More than perhaps the regulation itself, more about the ethics and how to make that happen. I think that's a really nice approach, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And it's all about kind of seeing, in the end, people don't care what is written in a document somewhere or what one says that a law says. People care what happens to them, what they experience. And I think that we should focus on that. Yeah. How can we bring out the essence of these acts and these regulations? How can we bring forward that it enables a sense of human autonomy, of freedom, of just feeling that you're in control, that I can choose. And then we can use technology to do those smart things. I think it's more that the reason why we haven't seen that surge and the presence of that at scale is just there haven't been really a business case for it. That it's more to see, okay, possibly the good part of regulation coming is that it possibly will create a greater business case for driving this forward. And in the end, if one can create both a positive impact on society and a good business case for it, we will actually see investments going towards that direction.
Then it will automatically drive in that direction, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see it happen. Yeah, we have a topic later for the AI Act and other regulations. I'm sure we will continue speaking about that.
And you just actually, before we were on camera, I was trying to go down a rhetorical path that we need to think about the practices versus technology itself. I think you said it better. It's how we implement ethics that's the critical path, because maybe we even have ethical frameworks to rely on or legal frameworks to rely on, but we need to find a way, how do we implement that? How should to go about that, implementing that effectively to have ethical AI? And here's the challenge then is, what you regulate, but also how do we make, the risk is with innovation is that we get paralyzed, right? So we really need to work on the implementation part, and this is what I mean. Are there other things that are more important around practices and how you implement
think about the effects,
thinking about the outcomes over the technology, regulating the technology, this is sort of regulative part, but then how to implement, how to go about it. I think that's what scares people off. They don't know how to act, and then we get paralyzed.
Yeah, but that's a part of the complexity,
Yeah,
it's that it's so much easier, yes, to write a recipe, but it's so much harder to sit by the table and share the dish with the people that you've made the food for and say, how did you like this? And I think it's that kind of that you need to be able to be part of a process, part of the reality, being able to take criticism, loop that back, make it better. And I think that's the part of and this actually is a good kind of going back to just the discussions we had around analytics in general. You need to be fully immersed in the reality of what is happening. Yeah. And that's when you actually
in the core
make
business, in the core in society.
Exactly, and how people feel about it. And it's when you're in that reality and truthfully kind of take in that experience, one can design and adapt to it. I think it's we need to make it hard for ourselves.
Yeah.
And being agile about not only technology but actually ethics as well.
Yep.
And in that way being able to promote beneficial use of technology and minimize negative use, basically, right?
Yeah. And it's exactly. And there's a ton of other really great reasons of doing it. I think one of the things that I'm trying to kind of come back to all the time is that if we know what we're doing and we have control over it and we have a focus upon the outcome and we can rectify it and improve it, we're actually signing up for more sustainable business models.
Yes, very well said, I must say. I mean, I think it has a big benefit if we can actually make the business case for ethical AI or data usage. That will make the whole business, steers automatically towards doing that. And I think that is truly a big use case. And if people understand that and actually make it part of the business model, they will have a big potential success, right?
Yeah. Hopefully that's something that becomes more aware and more. And I think that I hopefully the push for this will not only be compliance or law or just the risk of fines, but actually seeing that, wait now, we can build trust, we can create better products, better services. It's more to see that, it's a bit harder before we get the practices into place, before we have the competence to do these things. Sure, it will be so, but let's just, I usually kind of use the analogy of, we've been teenagers having fun with technology, all wild and crazy, and now we just kind of need to grow up, mature a bit, and it's a bit tougher, but we just need to do it.
I mean, if it's just compliance, then people will try to find whatever kind of shortcut they can to get away from it. But if it's actually part of the economics as well, so actually drives positive change in economics, then this will be something companies really strive for.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone that have kind of been into any kind of software reality for a while, we know that it's extremely costly to develop and shelf something. Yes. And it's more kind of saying how do we avoid that?
Yeah. Awesome. That's a great topic. It's easy to continue that, but before we continue that discussion, I would like to very much welcome you here, Giovanni Leoni. Thanks. It's a great honor to have you here at the season opening of the AI After Work podcast. And you're basically the global head of algorithm and AI ethics at IKEA, and it's my head just starts spinning when hearing that title, and so many questions pops it up in my head. But I must say, I think you actually have another title in your resume that I'm the most envious for, which is actually a nightclub manager in Radisson. You have to mention a bit about that. How was that like? Or what did you actually do at that time?
What did I actually do? It's exactly as it sounds. Now I think that it goes back to I was brought up in a restaurant. So my father, he came from Italy in the mid '70s, and he had Italian restaurants throughout my upbringing. So I'm the pizza boy. So that's my history. So when I started to get in my teens, I just said my father then knew a couple of nightclub managers, and I wanted to work for them. So that like the first day on my 18th birthday, I started working for nightclubs also. So I worked on the side of my studies. And one of the nightclubs that I was working for then while I was doing my studies was then at the hotel, the Radisson SAS Hotel. Yeah. So during nights, I was managing this nightclub with a capacity up to 3,000 people. And during days, I was studying business administration, just kind of get my head around it. But a really fun story out of that one. So I've been kind of in that context of service business and restaurant business throughout my younger years. I remember a Christmas day where we had the full capacity, a lot of people, and that was back in the days where it was still using physical cash. So it was the whole night. The only thing I did was, in addition to coordinating the 8 bars that were open, was actually just running around between the bars and collecting cash. So towards the end of the night, I ended up with a table the size of this one, just filled with piles of cash. And the hotel manager came down, it was like 4 or 5 in the morning, and said, "Do you want to help with counting this?" But no, I feel responsibility for this. I want to count it myself. So I ended up counting everything of that. The big pile took me at least 2 hours just to kind of get that sorted. But I felt that it was a kind of a part of that reward of actually just getting through that night.
Wow, counting cash.
Awesome story. It sounds like an awesome time as well. But with that, still, who is really Giovanni Leoni? How would you describe yourself?
I think I'm quite relentless in wanting to move things. I think that's the thing, that's me. I've launched myself into new challenges and new topics and new areas constantly throughout my professional career. And kind of see, okay, how can I make a difference here? How can I move? How can I move process or people or just invent things? I have tried to do a difference in terms of how to utilize data or create new business models or analytical models or just bringing new concepts to get people on board, just change. I think I'm the opposite of maintenance. I want to gear up things for maintenance so it's kind of effective. But when I've come to that point, I usually want to just kind of keep on growing things. So usually I throw myself into either where I get an opportunity to write on a canvas, something new and exciting. So that's a bit of creativity, but all these like enormous challenges. So one can just move it. And I think over time with maturity is that it kind of being humble that I'm just a person. You can only do change through and with people, like having a team of colleagues around you and moving, whether that is driving analytical change or driving change of processes or analytics and AI ethics at scale or driving automation at scale or like whatever that is. It's just kind of, you need to have a diverse group of people around you that have different ideas, different thoughts, different competences, and you drive that together. And I think that's been me on a professional side. And I think privately, I would say that I'm quite conscious of focusing on the things that is most important for me. So it's really about deep relationships and trying to make the best out of each day, and kind of really seeing that it's a blessing just to be alive.
Sounds like an awesome metaphor for life, actually. Yeah. Cool. But if we just move, you've been to IKEA at least 2 times, right? Or more throughout your career?
I've been there, I think, in total about a decade. Yeah. So first round I focus upon everything from global supply chain to process development and analytics development. And the second time around now, I did a stint outside external practice as head of automation in the city of Malmö. And then I came back focusing on analytics and now ethics with focus. So it's been there. And prior to that, I've been everything from e-commerce to software as a service products and the physical retail and like moving packets for UPS and of course a lot of service business.
What made you come back to IKEA? Can you just describe, what made you or attracted you to IKEA as a company? I think everyone knows IKEA, so we don't really need to describe it. But
for me, it is the first time around. It was really about I wanted to be in a place where I really enjoyed it being values led. You could see it from you could see it from the outside that there seems to be a strong spirit of doing things for the better, and I wanted to be in a place where there were opportunities to grow, and to you both grow as professionally in your role, but also beyond that. So I think that was the reason why I aspired to start working for the company in the first place, and then. When I kind of came in, it developed into further assignments and other exciting things and new fields. But also one thing led to another. So I ended up doing a project and that led to another role. Then I did another project that led to another role. Many times it's been a development over time that has just shifted. And then I went out a couple of years, and what made me come back was that one of the last things I did was seeing how could we work with advanced analytics at the part of Inter IKEA Group that I was working for. That was one of the last things, and I had great support by my manager at that time, trying to really build that kind of foundation, everything from literacy to platform and ways of working and use cases. And one of the last things was that I drove an advanced analytics project around affinity and substitution of range. So
sorry, once again, about what?
Affinity and substitution. So if this product is not on the shelf, what happens? What are the ripple effects across all baskets? And how does that impact the whole kind of setup of planning for that range? And how does that the ripple effects on everything else? So I've had been working on that idea for 5 years, defining it and kind of going through the process of making that more and more mature, and then I delivered that project. One of the last things, and for personal reasons, I left IKEA to work for City of Malmö as head of automation. And what made me come back was primarily that my private situation changed, but my manager came back and said, "Do you know what? What you build up, we're scaling. We need you. We need you to be a part of leading that." Nice. So it was more or less kind of picking up on the same pace and doing things at scale and being part of that journey of driving advanced analytics.
I mean, it sounds great. And IKEA, of course, is one of the top companies that they were most proud of from Sweden, and a success story in so many ways. But also to give some negative side on it, I remember speaking in IKEA at some point, like 2005 or something, like 20 years ago-ish. And it was for a new IT boss or something there, and we're trying to speak about the possibilities of using VR, even at that time, a long time back, or just having a bit more advanced web interfaces and going away from a physical catalog. And apparently it was super tough, and it was a big struggle to be more digitalized. At least that's my feeling at that time. Would you agree that in the beginning it was really hard to make IKEA become more digital?
It's a good question. I would say yes. As any non-digital native company, so it has a history of almost 80 years as a home furnishing business. It was successful even before computerization or digitalization. Right. Since the past 20 years and then the presence of computerization and digitalization, it has of course increased a lot its presence. And with any company, IKEA is not unique. If you're non-digital native, which is if you're not the Google, Amazon, or Spotify, then you need to. The challenge is not the new tech. It is how do you manage the legacy, and not really the technology part. That's not the big part. How do you manage the legacy of process and people?
Right. Yeah.
How do you manage to actually create a good enough reason to put in the effort to make a change the whole way you're working and the competence needed to apply that technology to be relevant? So that's a huge challenge, and I think that will be a challenge also, kind of, even if IKEA is on a big movement of digital transformation, it will be a hot topic and an important topic going forward. I'm an optimist still on most topics. So the good part of it is that it makes you, who is working with technology, to have a focus on the business.
Right.
You need to you bring in your competence and your understanding of technology. You bring that to the table, but at the table, you talk about the business value. That's upfront and most important. You need to have a clarity around that. You need to be able to talk that kind of language to be a part of shaping the business process that you want to move towards with a business angle to it. That needs to be in focus. And I think a non-digital native company kind of forces you to do so. Those that kind of don't have that focus, they seem a lot, why don't they listen to us in IT or digital analytics? Yeah, because one needs to come to the table and talk business. Then when one has agreed upon that common picture and where one wants to move and where the business value is of how, for instance, a certain business process would, by improving the decision support for a certain range, or support the pricing of something, or improve the user experience for a customer. Do we want that? Yes. Is that a part of your game plan? Yeah. Okay. Do you feel that you want to invest to get better performance out of that? Yes. Okay. Then we have the side part of redesigning process and technology. But that's the side part because we have agreed on the most important one. And I think that's a necessity for our non-digital native company. If you have a digital native company, that's already ingrained because the business model is already infused with the logic and process and technology.
But I want to pick up on this because, I mean, like, we go back, I think we met the first time in 2015, 16 in different conferences. Yeah. And I recognized very early, and I want you to share this on here a little bit, that we were in some ways sharing a common belief system, very much having to do with our experiences working with a company with a very, very proud history. Like I was at that time in Vattenfall, a 100-year company. So in many ways, a truly physical company with physical assets. And you were at IKEA. And what really, where I think we really connected is that on a very core fundamental level, our belief on how success will look like, or what is the actual change process all about, could be summarized very simply, and that is, how do we make the data topics, the analytical and AI topics, as a natural embedded part of core business? So I think when we see this in a company that has a legacy, there is this divide internally of who's the business people, and we are an analog process, and we have IT and technology people to support the core business. And the fundamental topic is, all our governance processes is set up in this fashion. The business and the other ones who supports them. And how can we now change the whole thinking, the mindset, the processes, to actually say, data, analytics, ethics is not the byproduct. It's something that is part of the core operations. So this was my understanding of this point of view, this life philosophy, sort of what change is all about. But I put a lot of words in your mouth, just to frame the topic, or it's because that's what I felt. Do you feel the same, or is that the kind of stuff that we're talking about here?
Yes, Henrik, I feel the same. No, I think the key it is really kind of how do we truly kind of get on that. It's about kind of really destroying the perspective of us and them. It's all about kind of the togetherness of it. And if we have a challenge to understand each other, then we just need to educate each other. I usually talk for thousands of hours with people just to understand their reality. And to really I usually tell the people that when I come into a new context, give me every single detail. Tell me everything, all the challenges. I remember when I was driving automation at the city of Malmö. There's a really good story. And then there is the discrepancies even larger. People I was the person from IT. I could have more or less been the person from Mars. And so I entered these management groups. And so their idea was that I was able to come in there and talk about this exciting topic of AI or automation. And I usually started the conversations with, what are your dreams? And it became really strange really fast. but I started off that because I wanted to understand what they were striving for. I don't care what's in your plan or what is official. What are you striving for? Why are you here? What is important for you? And then we after a while, when they got a bit softer, we came into what do you measure on? What decisions do you take? What does good look like for you? And then when we came to that point of they're starting to paint their dream, their rainbow and unicorn, I started then asking, what hinders you to get there? What is your gap? And when they started sharing to me their dreams and gaps, then we started talking about, we have technology to support you here. Let us do some process re-engineering and technology to support this. So it's actually beginning that conversation of understanding, and even understanding of letting people dream a bit of how could it be if we had all rules put aside, and really understand that, because I think we're also constrained with our organizational boundaries, our ideas and frames of work, and how we shape things, our project plans and development plans and the KPIs for the next 3 years. How can we think even more broadly? And then it's about how to meet up with that. So a bit of
but in a nutshell, what this sort of core idea is you cannot start from a tech perspective.
No.
You need to start with understanding the business, and then you need to play the game here, and then ultimately, if we think 5-10 years down the track for a non-digital native to be relevant, maybe in the future, at some point the setup is erased in its current form.
Yes.
The we and them is erased. It will be another type of setup.
Yeah, and we see that also. It's the whole idea that the discussion around. You can see that reoccurring in different shapes and forms, but you can see that in the discussion around data mesh and data domains, about domain focus, of getting close to business. It's all about really seeing, okay, we need to be as close to reality where things are happening as possible. And kind of being able to see how do you bring in the expertise to that reality. But it's not the expertise in focus. Is actually the reality and where things are happening and how you take decisions in that reality.
Yeah, so and to make this super simple, because it's not rocket science when you just look at it plainly, we simply now, to run and operate our core business, we need to add a couple of new disciplines and perspectives on our core business reality. It hasn't moved out of the core business reality. It just happens that you need to think about the data, AI, ethics perspective in the core business reality. It can't happen somewhere else. I think it's that simple.
Yep.
But just also of course, we really should think about the business value first.
Yeah.
Then it's another question of how to really bring and find and discover and innovate in business value. And then you can think about, okay, should it be domain experts in how to make sales happen, or how to manufacture a product, or how to design clothes or whatnot? And we sometimes speak about the catch-22 problem, which is that we have domain experts, let's say manufacturing for IKEA, and then we have tech experts. And tech experts don't know about the domain, and domain experts don't know about the possibilities with techniques. So if you just let domain experts, let's say in manufacturing, decide exactly what they should do, they will never come up with new innovative ways that technology can enable. If you just let tech experts decide everything, they will do the wrong thing that probably don't provide a business value. So do you have any thoughts about it? Would you agree with this catch-22 problem?
Yeah, of course, without a question. And I think that's what you need to do is you need to come to a clear understanding across all these groups that neither of us are right. Neither of us can do our job alone.
Exactly.
And I think as long as anyone think that they are right or can do their job alone, it's set up for failure.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the key things that is truly wonderful for an organization as IKEA, is that it is really strong on the idea of togetherness and kind of bringing people together, and kind of the idea that you can't do things alone. And I think that we need to see more of that I need to be able to bring in that different perspective. I need to learn about that different perspective. I need to be able to talk with that different perspective. So even if I'm an expert in tech, whether that is a data engineer, data scientist, business analyst, or whatever that be, is that I should have an incentive that if I want to do a good job, I need to learn the reality of my business partner. And just kind of understand, like, what are they talking about? What is important for them? What does the reference of good look like? And vice versa, to kind of be an inspiration for them to see that okay, you can take your domain knowledge and scale that to 1,000. What do you think about that?
But I want to ask you together, okay, the rhetorical setup you did is excellent, right? Because and the answer is, then I agree with the whole story. Like, no one can solve this. No one can be mastering. The value comes from the magic that happens in the intersect of the Venn diagram. So the new, we have a Venn diagram for tech and a circle for tech, circle for business. The new core, the new innovation happens in the magic here. Now,
can I pause you there before you go on with that? We're actually going back to the natural state of how things have been. Prior to us getting complex and big and diverse and spreading.
We were all doing it in this garage together.
Exactly.
Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, exactly. We're doing that, and the domain knowledge and the tech knowledge and the understanding of things, or you could say the expert knowledge and the domain knowledge was often in the same team or in the same person because it was a lower scale. And then suddenly things just got big and spread out. And this is actually more a like a resurgence back to a more natural state.
Oh, but is this a resurgence, or is it simply that we have been on an innovation to maturity curve on one S cycle, and now we're going into innovation and pioneering on a new S cycle? So there's different mechanics in innovation, growth, maturity. So but hold that thought. That's a good one. But I would like to use tips and tricks. Do we have any simple views? What are the simple mechanics or things you do in order to foster and make that magic happen? The translation between the two. Any good ideas? What works?
I have one word, and that is curiosity. You just need to be so.
Love it.
Yeah, it's curiosity. If you're not curious about your other person, that person that is different from you, because that's a different person. They maybe have a different training, a different background, a different point of view. They don't even use the same words as you. That's almost like from a different planet. If you're not curious about the different person, you will actually never make that happen.
But this is huge.
But then if we think about IKEA, a non-digital native company, and they have people that's been working there for 40 years, perhaps.
Yes.
They know how to do things.
Yep.
They have done that for many, many years, and no one should tell them, how to do their work.
Yes.
Then potentially we want to drive some change. We want to make some kind of transformation in terms of digitalization. How do you do that then? Because they may not be curious at all.
Absolutely not. You then need to work harder to show value. You need to be. That's just the reality. You come from you have a person that have done an excellent job. Let's say they've done 1,000 business, thousands and thousands, like tens of thousands of business decisions that have shown success at a global scale. There's huge amount of respect to that. And with the humbleness, then it's my job to bring value to the table. If I'm bringing a new idea that I want to change, the responsibility is on me to take that into account and show value. If I can show value, then the conversation can start.
I think that's good. So what you're saying is that have respect for the value that the guy in the business has created for maybe a whole career, and how big impact that person or girl or guy has had. So therefore, it's kind of on you to come to his turf and be able to articulate value together with that person.
Or even better, I would say, why does the most models that we design fail? Because they're not represented enough of reality. And here is where that domain knowledge is invaluable. To be able to bring that on board, translate that in how we design models. And I think it's actually, we need to start really seeing this experience as something that is invaluable to design relevant models, and to see kind of how do we kind of really make them want to share to design these models in a relevant way. And to see kind of, if we do so, then we can scale on top and augment their knowledge on top of it.
But let me try out another one. I think there is a very basic language barrier part of this, because when you go to university and you learn all about data science and data engineering, it is a lingo, of course. And if you work in a manufacturing setup, it's a very, very specific lingo around whatever you're doing in manufacturing, or like in any business, right?
Yep.
And here, basically, you don't sometimes even get the chance to show and discuss value and prove your worth, because the way you are speaking and talking means that your 10 seconds attention in the AIDA is gone, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you need to start with the simplest form here, to not kind of lose track of that, is that what do you need?
Exactly.
What do you want? You don't even need to
speak on your house.
No, you don't need to push. It's not about pushing things or ideas. It's actually trying to find that connection point and to see kind of getting that conversation going, because we're humans. We can't connect with each other if we kind of get that conversation going, then we build a common language, and then we build a common idea of how we want to make this kind of project or development work. But it needs to kind of start with that we are curious to ask that question. We just need to kind of acknowledge that no idea will be well received, no matter how valuable. No business model will be well received, because it doesn't have an anchored in the fundament that we are kind of really hitting home on the value that we have together.
Because you haven't established a common ground, so we can discuss value together.
Yeah, exactly.
So the common ground needs to be there. It goes back to the bar test. You know, if you are speaking in a way that you can't do in a bar.
Not in a bar, but in the business sense, right?
Speak like, start on the human side. Start on understanding what's the agenda here. What makes you tick? What makes your business tick? Or your,
Yeah,
don't go
exactly.
into.
And I think what is really exciting in those conversations is that oftenly the drivers is not part of the official KPIs. So we're actually having conversations of things that is not the official, is not things that are published or reported, but it's actually the true business processes and decision making underneath the surface.
Yeah.
And I think that's where things that are getting really exciting, because you then can connect, shape, form, deliver, move, and kind of make things happen, even if it's not like according to the official. It doesn't really matter if it's according to what is politically correct or according to what is officially planned or decided. You're actually in the business process. You understand what is happening there, and you try to meet that reality.
I'm very eager to move more into AI ethics and your favorite topics. But I'd just like to add one more comment to this question. And then if we move a bit into AI as well, to just continue that track later. I think one big problem that a lot of companies are doing when the type of messaging around AI often is it will replace humans. And that actually makes a lot of people very scared.
Yeah, let me tell you a story.
Okay.
Usually when we come to that, I have a really fun story.
Yeah.
So I was head of automation at the city of Malmö, like 30,000 plus co-workers. And so it's public sector. And I was responsible to automate. Okay. There's a potential of about 30% to automate away tasks in the public sector generally, from what we've seen kind of researching the last couple of years. So I ended up around a table with all the central representatives of all the unions, talking about why we should automate tasks for their employees. So the atmosphere was a bit tense to start off with. And I came across quite straightforward with them and said that I know that it's your responsibility to safeguard the jobs of your members. I know that. But it's also your responsibility to provide them with a better life. They should not waste away their time doing tasks that software should do. They should focus their time on tasks that are fit for humans and their competence and their capabilities, and make their life better, so they feel that it's more valuable to come to work every day.
That's also, once again, music for my ears. I'm having my tics here saying that term time and time again. But it's actually, you're basically saying it
music
exactly the same.
Music for my ears.
Yeah.
We have to put it, okay. Anyway, I love what you said.
There's a feature in here somewhere.
So that meeting ended up well, at least, and I got a great support from them, and we did a lot of wonderful things, and they're still doing a lot of great things with the people that are kind of driving that force. But we need to be able to understand that. And it goes back, like, it's all, sure, technology can enable a lot of exciting things. But what we need to kind of bring forward is, what are humans really good at?
Yes.
What can we bring to the table, and what can we kind of really make a difference of? and how can technology augment or kind of do the rest things?
Isn't that the entry point to ethics? To basically, so. That's a baseline. I think
I'd just like to end it. You know, the same thing that I'm trying to say, as you just did, in my own words, which is to say that AI is good at some tasks, and humans are good at some tasks, but other types of tasks. And usually AI is good at tasks that are really boring and really repetitive. And humans, fortunately, are really bad at these kind of repetitive and boring tasks, but really good at other stuff that AI is not good. So it turns out that AI, luckily, is a very good complement to humans. So it is very obvious to me, at least, that the best ways to use AI is to complement humans and use them together and not to replace humans. Do you agree with that?
Exactly. And I think that what we need to figure out is both getting that kind of storyline to be fundamental, but also that we start investing a lot of money in the interface. How do we create such a great interface that we can have an iterative process where we as humans get suggestions, give feedback, get feedback, interact, really kind of being that fluent part in connection with technology, and where there needs to be enormous amount of money spent into user experience development to kind of back that up. And I think that is it's undervalued to an extremely high degree. And when we come to that point where we can have a great interaction and a great division of work, I think we're going to have a wonderful work life.
I think you're nailing the point on some of, what are the key working areas in order to get value out of AI for society. And if we think the complementary story is the right one, then, AI augmented UX to really understand how that process now looks like. This constant feedback loop that actually improves, appreciates the value of the algorithm on the one hand side, and at the same time, makes life and the workflow fluent, easier, and convenient for the person doing the work. So it's not like, I'm leaving my workflow to go to my BI tool. Come on, It's the antithesis of what we're talking about here. It's the antithesis of what we're talking about.
Exactly. Then you need a human to translate everything and do the analysis all over to do the consequence.
So this AI, how we look at, reporting is flawed. It's based on, we had something, we did it in one way. Maybe it has the purpose that you need to, that's a work in itself. But any insights, anything we need to do like that, if we truly believe in complementary, this topic of understand the research on how our humans dealing with numbers, right? How are we dealing with decisions? And how can we make that so we feel credibility, trust? I think this is a huge
and I think this is actually the best way to have ethical AI. Just trying to find a bridge here.
Great. And let me start off that journey, that topic with a story. Let's make it tangible here.
He runs the show, Anders, not us.
No, it's good.
I love it, Johnny. Go.
So what is it? 7 years ago, the translators at Inter IKEA Group, they felt that, we're great in translating text, product information into local languages, active in 60 plus countries around the world. How can we augment ourselves? Were their thoughts. So one brought on board then a global translating provider to translate from one language, from English to the local language. We know natural language processing is notoriously hard. Even harder when we talk about how it skews in terms of biases and tone of voice. It's when you really wanted to get it really 100% right and have a zero threshold, like zero tolerance for it being wrong, then it's super hard. If you want it rough, fine, you can have it. But if you want it really, really great and have a super fine tonality according to a certain way of approaching it and really remove the biases of gender and others, then it's super hard. So we brought on the provider and designed the process in a way that Translators, being in the driving seat, sends the suggestion that they want to translate it. They get back the what is the suggested translation. So augmentation, they're in the first step, super fast. Then they review it, full stop, human in the loop. Controlling what they think is relevant, improving, adapting, and changing it before setting it off into operations in the local languages, but also going back to the closed repository of approved language translations that it then use again for the next translation.
All right, so the feedback loop as well.
Yes.
Feedback loop.
Yeah, human in control, feedback loop, control of biases, tone of voice, the full expertise of the translators that are also trained in the tonality, cultures and values, tone of voice, and all of those things. So you really utilize the full capability and capacity of the human while also augmenting what you can, but having a high awareness that it is limited. It will not be pushed. So it's monitored to see how it improves over time, but fully conscious that it will never be perfect.
I mean, I think I wish more people, understood that AI is really very superficial. It doesn't have anywhere close to the ability to do more deep analysis and having, possibility to contextualize things. But it can do a very superficial and fast, augmentation of tasks or enrichment. I usually call it filtering and enrichment of data in some way. And what you said, later you have a semi-automated way to use AI for what's good at. It gives some kind of superficial, quick answer, and then you have humans doing the refinement and improving it. And then if you have a feedback loop as well, as you said, it will continue to improve over time a lot, right?
Exactly, and I think this is kind of one of the very straightforward examples where we kind of need to see what is fit for purpose, and this will change for every context, and also the capability of the technology. And I think here's also where we have ethics entering the scene, is the consciousness of what does it mean with this kind of data, what does it mean with this kind of process, and what does it mean with the term of impact. Because if we would shoot out really strange translations like some e-commerce actors on the Swedish market, then it would be that are translated without any checks and balances. Then it comes across just as strange.
But I wish more companies who want to develop tech understood and approached the problem from this, what I would argue is business process re-engineering fundamentals. So we are consciously understanding what it's good at, and we are re-engineering how we understand the process, and we send it out. So it's not only that we have an AI translator that now we pop it in. It's a very conscious choice on how the process looked like this before. Now it looks like this, and you describe the process, including the feedback loop. And obviously, if you want to have value from data and insights, it's not until you adopt it and it's used that it really provides value. And I'm amazed how little or how much of a backseat these topics gets if we're not careful and we drive a tech project. And I'm speaking from experience. I've done the same mistakes. That you get the attention and effort on understanding to build the perfect translation engine, but you should have spent an equal amount of time on understanding the whole process. I think this is a very good example. But what's the bridge now to ethics?
Well, I think we can phrase it like this: ethical AI by having human in control in some way. You said human in control. I think it's a good term to use. Yeah. So by making sure that humans are in the loop, so to speak, and perhaps not making, at least not dangerous decisions by itself, you can keep having intelligent systems, if you call it that, more ethical. Would you agree?
Yes, and I think we need to see also the role of humans will shift over time.
Yes.
As things are dumb, we need to be more engaged. Yes. When systems and technology becomes smarter, we will take a different role in steering. steering towards what comes in, steering parameters across, and steering output. And I think this is kind of where we need to be able to start detaching ourselves from the thoughts that everyone should be able to know and understand everything. But rather see that we need to be able to create processes that are suitable for digital progress, technology progress, where we are more or less seeing that the important part that we keep control, that it doesn't, that we have control over the process and we have full control of the output. And if we see that it starts steering away from our goal and our kind of goal picture, whether that is business performance, but also our values as an organization, then we need to be able to identify, rectify directly. And I think we'll be more steering more towards that point where we are more giving direction to technology and keeping track that it fulfills things, rather than being in the nitty-gritty parts of kind of doing the details. Because technology will become smarter, but we will need to be able to be also capable of handling that control and steering it.
If I understand what you're saying, I mean, like, as technology gets smarter, and now we can get into the next, new coding paradigm, software 2.0, whatever you want to call it, when we don't really do all the coding anymore, we tell the code what it should write itself, and then we use it. Then actually knowing what you ask for and what data you feed into it becomes super important. Is that what we're talking about here? That our role, we are not the coders anymore per se. We're using technology, algorithms, we do it in different ways. But our ability to be in the steering seat and give it the right data becomes really a critical job for us.
It becomes important, but I think also we can't lose track on the competence that we know what happens throughout. But I think it becomes more important that we are very conscious of the process, that we're in control of the process and definitely in control of the outcome. Because I think that's something that we can't lose track of.
No.
And we can't, and if we feel that we don't have enough understanding of it, then it's our obligation to learn about it.
Yes.
I mean, having human in the loop and being able to understand the outcome, I think, and see it when something goes wrong, as long as you do that, I think you at least minimize the risk of having non-ethical AI systems or high-risk systems going haywire, so to speak, right?
But, and really, how much is really the understanding of the business of how AI works part of the ethical problem? That we don't really understand, and we're getting ourselves into stuff. We don't truly do it in a conscious way. Is that part of the ethical problem? That we put ourselves in a problem that we didn't understand that would happen? If we had more data AI literate leaders, we wouldn't do those mistakes.
I think it's about kind of, we need to be very conscious about what we need to be clear what we mean with literacy in this case. We don't need literacy to be down on the nitty-gritty details of the expert knowledge. But I think it is important that we are having a good enough understanding of the drivers and the impact differences of what certain data gives for kind of risks or opportunities, what kind of models is fit, what kind of certain processing, whether that is models or something else, does the data. And also, I think the main part that is one of the absolute most complex ones is that you have a certain output of data in a certain process. What happens when that hits reality in combination with other data or other processes? And what happens then? Because I think we sometimes want to simplify things into very simple silo solutions or silo data or silo outcomes. But it's when we start combining those also that the complexity rises. So literacy for me is also understanding that you have a consciousness enough to demand that the process is there to keep control. And then the details of that is more left to experts to kind of be in control of.
Cool. And I think, just to linger a bit longer on what you said, it's a bit dangerous, I think, when the preference is different when it comes to ethical AI and business AI, or when the ethical values differs from the business values. I think it really needs to be ethical preferences should be part of the business values, I think. Otherwise,
then
it will be
problematic.
Yeah, right? I completely agree. I had a wonderful conversation with with the third largest fast food chain in the U.S., Chick-fil-A, about the topic of them wanting to develop and scale on responsible AI and ethical program. They're really values-led as an organization already. They have that as a top priority in their organization and how they design everything. So I said to them, they have been talking with a lot of consultancies, companies that had a lot of great ideas how to implement responsible AI. So I said to them that you don't need to make it that hard. Just listen to yourself. What do you believe in? How do you want to run your business? And then you move that, how your values led in your organization, and you move that in analogy into how you put that into practice within AI ethics. It should deliver the same outcome. It should be able to deliver the same things. Because that, you don't need an external standard to tell you what is right or wrong. You already know what is right or wrong because you want to see that in the outcome that is. So it's also about simplifying and going back to this simple idea that you don't need to make it overly complicated or create like a separate or diverse idea. There's a lot of great ideas around standards and principles that's good to listen into. But I think for things to be genuine, you need to go back to what you stand for as an organization.
But it needs to be the same.
Yes.
I think that's the simplest answer. Because, if you're an unethical company, come on. But what I think the most profound part of that advice is ethics, and this is super important. But what people are struggling with is now, if they are a value-led company, this is a good example, that they have values and they know right from wrong as a core identity in the company. The problem is not that they need to invent a new identity over here. They need to understand how to translate that into what is our routines, or how do we enforce or execute and implement. Yes. How do we do what we do in our normal business that we're really proud of? How will that contextualize in the AI context? That's it.
Yep.
It's that simple, right? So if I'm doing this in my normal processes, how do I go about and getting my values out and getting my ethics out? Well, we do this. Okay, what does that mean that you need to do now in order to translate the same stuff, but in a digital or AI context?
And just to continue that train of thought, what is the IKEA take on ethical AI?
Good point. It is the good part is a couple of years ago, the movement started to see, okay, how can we bring a history of being values-led for almost 80 years into the digital context, and how can we put that into becoming even more tangible from a digital ethical point of view? The AI ethics approach is deeply rooted, so it ended up with a digital ethics policy with clear commitments, principles, and kind of...
So you wrote down and defined a policy?
Yeah. And the executive board has supported it. So we kind of licensed to operate, to say so.
License to operate. I was thinking license to kill, but that sounds really bad.
That's James Bond.
That's James Bond, yeah, exactly.
You look like James Bond today.
Exactly. I tried to act a role. So the good part is that what is transparent throughout that, if we look upon the algorithmic and AI part, it has a clear presence of the work that has been done through trustworthy AI within the high-level expert group in EU. Yeah. So it's deeply rooted there. It is really having a focus upon the human autonomy, having a clear presence about how to take responsibility of the actions and the outcomes. It's also the whole idea of we need to be having robustness, and within robustness comes that we should know how it works, why it works, the reproducibility, repeatability, that we can change it, we can affect it. So it's kind of, yes, making it work itself.
And when did this start? Was there a point when IKEA made a decision, we need to find some kind of ethical policy that we should abide by?
Exactly. I would say that this work started off about 2 years ago, and we've been having a policy since a year. And I think going forward, that will become more and more transparent also on the outside. We're integrated into different into strategies that will become more apparent. But I think the main focus has been for us to do things rather than talking so much about it. We like to talk about the approach we have because I think that is important of supporting the narrative and around our peers and the conversation that we need to see ethical AI or algorithmic and AI ethics. I usually use those two words together because I want to bring in everything stupid to everything very, very complex into that scope.
It's like the definition from the AI Act of AI, which includes everything.
Everything. And I love that because it... I used to simplify it to the point, like, what do you do? I used to simplify, like, we tell machines to do stuff. It actually is important that we are conscious as humans when we do so. So that's everything algorithmic. So we have been doing that, but we will see what we see is as important is by building up that capability within the organization. Both recruiting, getting people on board, getting integrated into business processes.
So recruitment, do you have a special type of title or type of competence that you are recruiting for?
Yes, we're having digital ethicists as part of our team, and we're all across the board. Everything from digital touch points to algorithmic processes and everything in between. Supporting businesses, being highly engaged into business cases as advisory. Developing policies for specific businesses. So we're in the nitty-gritty parts of details. Right. It's not about compliance. It's not about, talking about it or saying that we feel good. But it's actually seeing, I find it wonderful when we see that we can impact decision-making. That's where we make a difference.
But I think this is super cool. I mean, like more focus on doing than talking. But
that's music to my ears.
And I think that's one of the hardest parts to take something which is quite complex and philosophical almost if I talk ethics and make that operational.
Yep.
So could you give us some sort of simplistic overview of how do you go about making it work, or how do you engage, or how do you get AI ethics into, if I take a use case or a case, how have you organized the sort of operating model to get AI from the ivory tower
exactly. We started off, we saw a blueprint for an ivory tower, and then we scrapped it. We didn't even build that one.
Good.
It doesn't exist.
How do we do this? Because I think that's very interesting to talk about.
Exactly, and it goes back to one of the topics we mentioned before, curiosity. We just need to be unsatiable, curious.
But how do you get into the core process? Tangible, is it part of the project? How is it in practice? How do you get into process and
exactly.
Governance?
Let's start off. Let's kick hierarchy, process, belonging, should do, must do to the curb. It's just getting into that conversation with people. Getting them interested enough that it's valuable for them, inviting them to the meetings, having them spill their guts about their details. And then along the way, where we are extremely fortunate, I must say this because many aren't that fortunate, we tell the story of you can make this sustainable from a business process point of view. You can be living the IKEA values if we take the ethical considerations into mind when we design this. So we do hands-on analysis of data, process, and outcome. And then we, at any given time, give the support necessary as a partner, not as an expert function, not as a compliance function, but as a partner.
To the business units or the projects?
Yes, hands-on. To see, this is how we can do this to make it leading towards a path where it's more considerate of this. There is no black and white here. It is actually being conscious.
But so you're in a sense a SWAT team that is very experienced in this, that basically go out and evangelizes and get embedded or discusses with different business units or projects, and in this way, by starting talking, understanding what should we be doing in terms of gaps or fixing things, or you should add this topic, or
exactly. So very tangibly looking upon the specific data process and outcomes, and really seeing again what does happen here, what can happen, using moral imagination. We're thinking about being creative here. What can go wrong? Really talking about the really challenging things, but not stopping there. Not stopping at no. Not stopping at shouldn't. Actually talking about what could be a possible solution here. We're in the business of business. We're in the business of doing things.
That's also how you approach it.
Yes.
We are not the yes and no police. No. We are here to partner with you to solve this problem in an ethical way.
Exactly. We're here so you can feel proud of talking about this. And I think that's kind of really going through it. And also, of course, this is a part of our advisory part. Then we're also doing things at scale, seeing how we can design business processes to do it themselves, evangelize that they feel that they can drive this force. We're not here to be the bottleneck. We're just here to be the catalyst.
So then you need to build tools for self-service so they can basically take it upon themselves in all the different teams.
Yeah, we have that, but we're just kind of going towards the idea that this will be fully scalable across everything, and seeing how we can do that over time.
I think that's another T-shirt. We're not here to be the bottleneck. We're here to be the catalyst.
Yeah,
I love it. And it sounds really great, I must say, with, get rid of the compliance and instead, get the ethics into the process instead. Could you potentially, exemplify this somehow? Have you started with some specific part of some process? Could you give some example?
One I could very specifically talk about. I can mention it without going into too much detail, but it's a kind of a discussion around, okay, how do we work with how we analyze data around coworkers, and how do we work with certain type of categories? How do we search with type of data? And here it's been such a wonderful process where we have just started that journey, because we're starting the journey. Okay, what data do we have? What can we know now? But then it doesn't end there. But it's actually a discussion of where do we want to go? What is the future we want, and what are the decisions we want? And what are the risks of the data we are looking at and taking decisions around? How can we take into consideration the quality, the diversity, and the inclusive perspective fully when we're both collecting the data and analyzing the data and the decisions we take? And how do we do that in a way so we both enable good decisions, but don't control or create a disenfranchised effect on certain groups? And so it's everything like, and I think those kind of discussions really show, really taking the next step in maturity, in seeing that we're super conscious around how we are embracing that area, seeing that we need to enable understanding of the status, but also enable decision making, but not at the expense of the individual or certain groups, and seeing how we can progress that area in a responsible way. And it's having that kind of discussions and seeing how we can see that we are actually empowered to do wonderful things here. We don't need to simplify it to the point that it actually creates negative impact on certain people. And still we can enable decision making when we can explain it doesn't work well here. Okay, on what detail do we need to show that it doesn't work well or it's diverging to enable decision making on that level?
I think this is a typical example of when you focus on the outcome rather than the technique, and saying that data about coworkers in general is bad is a dangerous path to take. Data about coworkers can really help.
We need to know how many FTEs we have in our companies. We should, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is a typical example. I mean, a technique, being able to use data to understand things, and potentially if you want to use it to understand coworkers, it can be used in a very positive way.
Yeah.
What you want to regulate or try to get away from is the negative effects of using data about coworkers.
Exactly, and I think that's where kind of the discussions then arises like, okay, what decisions do you take? On what data? Why? What do you want? And then you start looking upon the data. How is this skewed? Do we have more than two categories for gender? Okay, how do we support that? Is there a target for certain representation? On what level? And it's really kind of being able to shape that discussion. So you kind of bring in the complexity of having a really human approach to it, but they're fueled by data and having business also. And you allow that complexity. You allow that on the table. You don't shy away from it. You allow the complexity and you find your path through it. And I think that's the thing, is that we need to we can't simplify things, but actually allow that complexity, and then we find a good path forward that is conscious, and then we learn from that, and then we kind of progress it.
I think if anyone listening now, I mean, like, what would be very interesting to learn or hear about is like, putting the context, IKEA is a huge global company, and now we are taking a new topic like AI ethics. I would argue it's fairly new, and but it's something that we believe many or all big enterprises, they need to go down on this journey. And I would argue, where do you start? How do you think about the journey? So do you want to share some ideas on how you were thinking, on the core phases, how you were starting it up? What did you go first? You mentioned it a little bit, getting the policy signed off by the executive board, but how have you been thinking about the journey? What is important in the beginning of the journey? Where are you now? So elaborate on a bit higher scale how to go about and think about this, and how you did it for the last 2 years, and with your projection for the next couple of years.
Yes, I'm happy to have kind of joined about midway the process, and I think for any organization, whether that is private or public, one needs to be well rooted in the existing vision and values. That's the starting point. I think one needs to be able to kind of take a root in that, and if your value is to just kind of deliver dividend for your like shareholders, then you have a completely different set of problems. That's a completely different topic, and I feel sorry for them, and hopefully they'll find their path.
Need to start with they need to start the journey way earlier with the value.
Exactly. So that's a whole different discussion, and I feel sorry for them. They'll find their reason to be also. For those other organizations that actually have a purpose and mission, is to be deeply rooted in that and understand, okay, how does this translate in how we design? How does that translate in how we design business processes? How does that translate in how we give direction of moving process, technology, and people? And I think that's the journey each organization needs to make.
That's a starting point to really understand, to flip your business mission and values into the first way is to really start understanding what does it mean from this context.
Yes, exactly. And then you can go like you move a step towards kind of policy or directions or guidelines, and then you move further down into, okay, what does this mean for each of our business units? But the outcome should loop back to the vision.
Yeah.
And that should kind of tie it all together.
But did you have a very clear sort of roadmap that year one is all about going from this to policy?
No,
year two is all about taking care of these categories?
We can't make it in that way, because it's all depending upon the organization as such. Our ambition as a team and that work across Inter IKEA Group is to see how can we help everyone else, because we're just a small team growing, but we're still in the bigger context.
You're a very small team in the huge context of
exactly.
IKEA
So
Group.
it's more about how can we inspire others to find a choice here. How can we enable them to find a language many times? Because being a values-led organization helps you because they're already doing like a lot of great decisions. So they're doing right already, but we want to enforce them with a language and a support to kind of strengthen their decision making. They're doing a lot of great things. We want to strengthen them. We want to give them the opportunity that gut feeling is actually leading for them to be supportive of utilizing a smarter technology that is more privacy enhancing. So our ambition as a team is to build up the awareness of the organization, the awareness, that gut feeling.
So that is really sort of goal number one.
Yeah, exactly.
Phase one,
so exactly,
awareness.
gut feeling, awareness. I know when I'm about to take a decision now around data and technology, then I should be aware that there are ethical considerations.
Okay, number one.
That's one, gut feeling. So this is kind of the model.
The first wave.
Yeah, exactly. The values-led decision-making model. Second step, and that is decision made by techies and decision makers in business. So it's not recluded to only the technology department, but anyone with a budget, anyone being able to buy anything. So the touch points are like infinite. So that's the first step. We're enabling that through awareness, training, information, spreading the word, being connected to people, one-on-one conversations, just kind of being deep into the nitty-gritty details of things. Just trying to be everywhere and never seeing a stop of it. We will never stop creating awareness. That is not an end line to that business. Number two, if they realize that this is an area that we should be taking into consideration, that activates the mind, the deep consideration, enabling kind of bringing in the expertise of not only us like digital ethics team, but actually everyone that should be around the table. The techists, the business people, the legal counsels, the security specialists, the data privacy specialists, whomever that is relevant to be around the table to discuss this, to see how do we relate to this issue, whether that is a procurement process or in-house development project or something else, to bring in that deep reflection, to use the mind. The system 2, if we use the Daniel Kahneman's model. System 1, reaction. System 2, reflection and deeper knowledge. But it doesn't end there, really. And here's where the principles that we have in our policy and that we're guided by, which we have expressed, supports the third part, which is the heart, is that how to drive decision making. I think here's the thing that is sometimes lacking, is that sometimes when things are uncertain, that is often the case with novel technology, you are hindered because you don't know the future. You haven't tested this before. And the system 1 of reaction and the system 2 of deep reflection is based on prior knowledge and competence. But to take a decision, you actually need to imagine yourself a future. And here the heart and the values we stand for is about the imagination. Will this go towards the direction of our values to take this decision? Even if it's more costly, that doesn't really matter. It's of less importance. But it's actually, does this decision support towards the right direction? Does this decision follow our value set? Can I justify this investment decision or this investment, like saying no to something, because I can justify it from our values? Then that supports it. So it creates, like, being this values-led and having principles have its sole purpose to support decision-making. So you get movement. So awareness, reflection, deep discussion, action, and just doing that repeatedly going forward.
And have you now, when you set up this organization and recruiting ethicists, have you been needing to be conscious about, okay, how will I operationalize awareness, like
Yes.
the trainings? So this is one part of this setup. How will I operationalize deep reflection and analysis? And how will I, so has that even gone down then these stages into how you need to think about how many resources, how's our processes,
yes.
in order to operationalize
So we have done that. We're doing it. We're actually just making things happen.
Yeah. Cool.
So it is happening on a daily basis. I think we have such a backlog of exciting things and discussions to do. So time isn't enough. It's just we just need to prioritize and see that we focus on the right things.
But I think it's super important that when you go on a journey like that, to also take a step back and say, like, we need to have an awareness muscle. We need to have a reflection muscle that we bring to the table, to really understand how to set it up.
But we need to see awareness also, like, awareness is created through the everyday discussions we have with people.
That's what I mean. Then you need a muscle. That doesn't happen if someone is not facilitating or driving or opening up to that discussion. And ultimately, in a company with more than 100,000 employees, you're a bit more than that. Then you need to think carefully, how can I create this awareness, on scale, at scale? The scale topic, I mean,
Of course it does, but it's also to see that you will not reach everyone.
Oh.
You have a focus on your prioritized key stakeholders.
Yep.
You show examples of when it works, and you start also thinking scale 1,000 already from day one. Thinking scale 1,000 in terms of automation, of picking up all the algorithmic changes to models. Like, you need to be able to think in that kind of scaling also. You need to be able to think in scaling in terms of that each and every conversation is a part of a change journey.
Yep.
It's not about like having a communication asset. It's actually being the communication asset.
Exactly.
It's not about seeing that change will come day one, but every conversation is part of the change journey. So it's really kind of seeing how you go in for the long haul, and also attracting and having a team, and the team we have is amazing, to really be passionate about the topic, because we meet challenges on a daily basis, but we feel like a belief in it, a belief that if we do a difference here, will impact it at scale for the organization, but also because this is early times in the area of AI ethics, we can actually contribute to being a change of a positive change also for the industry at large.
I'd just like to go back a bit to an interesting thing you mentioned before, which is that you hired AI or digital ethicists. If another company listening to this are interested in doing the same, can you give some advice in how do you actually recruit digital ethicists?
Yes, it's a very good question.
Is there a course somewhere, or are there some
yes, there is training, there is courses, there is education to it. There are, of course, also there isn't that much track record of people working.
Yeah.
Would
you advise universities to start having courses in this? Leading question, I know.
We're actually engaged in contributing to that.
Cool.
To like, and I think it's part of to start off with. We have I have a dialogue with multiple universities in terms of both discussions but also collaborations. So and many academics, there's good ones both in the Nordics and across the world, are really great in thank you on developing this area. So the academic field has been on this topic for a while, and which is great. There's many non-for-profit organizations that is driving this agenda too, many networks that are driving it, and there is a couple of consultancy companies that are that have come a bit along the way. Not that many corporates.
Right.
So we can't expect people having an experience from a corporate reality.
Right.
We can't have that as part of the prerequisite.
Yes.
What we do need, what I would highly recommend in this context, is to see how can you be passionate enough about the topic of doing good for society, having appetite enough to understand the complexity of technology, and grit enough to actually work in a corporate context and know what the business reality demands. Because when you're sitting at the table, you need to combine all three things at the same time. You're not having the luxury of being philosophical. You don't have the luxury of only being business oriented. You don't have the luxury of being only technology focused. You need to be able to bring all those three dimensions of values, business, and tech into the same conversation. And that means that you don't need to specifically have been working as a digital ethicist or AI ethicist before, but you need to be very conscious of those three fields, be able to put them into practice. And putting them into practice is not being the compliance of no, or like the department of no, or working as a compliant, or like going through a checklist, but actually being more like a business developer, like saying, okay, how do we do things here?
But this is super important, right? Because there's not a CV recruitment yet. I have 5 years experience as a data ethicist. So you need to peel the onion on it. And then actually going the compliance route or being a bureaucrat in this is maybe not at all the right problem. So you're highlighting, you're looking for fundamentally experience around value and what is value and being value oriented on a broad level, I assume now, like our identity and values in society. Yes. Business acumen, because otherwise you will not connect, and then tech.
Yes.
So three major areas that you want to see in a quite interesting resume right now.
It is, and it's also to be very conscious. It's not about like you need to have X amount of years in it. No, show me that in a conversation.
So the right attitude.
Exactly. It's about sort of like bring that into the conversation. I think this is actually what we need to be able to talk about more. The capability to have those three dimensions. Not about that you've specifically worked X amount of years in certain things. No,
because someone can have done three things, but they can't put them together.
No,
it's different.
Exactly. You can be that you have experience in two of the fields, but you have an extremely high interest and awareness of the third one. Good enough. Good enough, because if you have a curiosity enough and you're put into this context of IKEA, you'll do fine. because you'll be driving those 3 areas.
But you said another thing also that I think is super important for all of this work, but it's especially when you go into a new field where the field itself is not really yet established.
No.
You need to have grit. So the point is this: you need to not only have those things. You need to have the pannben, the forehead, to bounce across walls, and you need to love it.
Yeah.
I used to say in Vattenfall, "Oh, I love Don Quixote. This is a Don Quixote work. You need to love fighting windmills.
Yeah.
If you do that, this is the perfect job for you."
I turn that around. Like people like usually ask me like, how do you get things done? And then I usually say, I do 100 things, I get 10 things done in the end. And I think that's the thing is you need to be wanting to create an output and push things, ideas, thoughts, conversations in the hundreds. So you get the key things that actually get traction to fall through and to make that happen. And I think it goes back to this idea of seeing it as business development. Business development is actually that kind of attitude, is that you see that some things takes time, some things fall out, some things get traction. And it's all kind of having that kind of mentality, but then you kind of bring that into this context of complexity.
This is great advice.
The time is flying by rather quickly, and I'm trying to see if we should move perhaps into some more societal long-term
Actually, I want to go to a really boring topic, but I think a really important topic.
Yeah, sure.
I would like to spend a couple of minutes exploring the AI Act.
That was my topic.
Okay, I thought you were going philosophical. You're going societal. Okay, go there. Sorry, we're on the same page. Because I think it's super important to talk about that with people like Giovanni, who basically has the value, business, tech hat on when we are trying to implement the correct regulations. Because we are going really wrong when the bureaucrats get the hold of this. So let's go here, please.
Yes, how should we start? But some background, there is a new directive come up from EU called the AI Act, and it's been progressing over the years.
Maybe a small definition or framing like you do now, but be more concrete before we go into it for the listeners who don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And as GDPR, it has great intentions. It's really trying to minimize the beneficial use of AI and trying to minimize the malevolent or abuse of AI in different ways, and trying to find the best for humans and society in general, like an ethical way of using AI, right? Or what would you say the intention of AI Act is, really?
I think it tried to really encapsulate and make it the legislative support of the great thoughts around that has been developed within trustworthy AI from the high-level expert group, and to make that come to life. It's also making rules of a game that haven't had that many rules so far.
And it's been rather controversial, the whole journey. And the first version of the AI Act and the definition of AI that it had was strange, if I use diplomatic terms.
It was broad.
It was all encompassing. It was basically including any kind of digital system.
No, if you read the AI Act definition, it basically encapsulates any software, in my opinion.
Yes. But I must say, it's really been improving over the years, and especially with the latest, I'm not sure if you read the latest version from Czechia. And this summer from July, it's really been improving both in terms of the definition of AI and also in terms of how both the risk definition is being done and moving, I would say, a bit more into the effects rather than techniques in different ways. And also these kind of things with human in a loop kind of effect. It's if you actually have human in a loop and it's not a fully automated system, and there is less risk and more or easier to comply with the regulation, if you call it that. Anyway, there are so many different takes on the AI Act, but let's just start broadly. What's your thought about the AI Act so far? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it will have a positive impact? Or do you have any fears of it hindering innovation? Just start off in this very broad way.
Exactly, all of the above.
Yes.
Personally, and also kind of from a company point of view, it's a great movement forward. It is great that we start seeing things becoming concrete, because legislation is concrete. It is actually giving room for being more values-led and enabling human values in the context of advanced technology. It's also really pushing forward the integrity of and autonomy of humans in very challenging areas. It's also making a very red line towards certain applications as social scoring. So I think that's great. It's also very much aligned with the direction as also of IKEA as a company to going toward. We have more or less we have a high inspiration of our digital ethics policy from the trustworthy AI work.
Right.
So we're much aligned with that direction. So that's all good. Then when we start getting down to smaller details, so let's beyond that, it's all rosy and wonderful. When we start going down to the definition, we don't care that much. And the reason for that is that we will act as if all algorithmic processes should have the same kind of control, surveillance, steering, and control over outcome. We take a broader scope.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So we don't care where you put that line. We will comply to an even higher standard because we just want to push ourselves, not to the level of compliance, but beyond.
Right.
So that's where we don't care that much of the definitions, because we want to comply more. That's
actually that moves to another question, which is that do you really need an AI-specific regulation, or should it be a more general one?
Exactly, and that's also kind of where I stand, is that we don't need to get into the nitty-gritty details of how we define AI. We just need to talk about how we as humans tell machines what to do.
Right.
And that is more or less advanced. And I think we just need to be able to take in, because when we tell machines to do stuff, whether that is strictly rule-based or reinforced learning or deep learning or and everything in between, it works on the same logic that we decide what data to use, to what process to use, and the outcome it comes. Period.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we don't need to make, where it makes difference is companies that want to go the compliance route. The compliance route is that you only want to limit yourself to as minimal compliance as possible, because that drives administration and you want to keep to that level of control. So you kind of limit yourself to that. So it becomes more like a mechanical process. We're not looking upon this topic in that way. We're looking upon a much broader topic. Then, of course, the definition where it makes sense that we have an interest in it is just tell us what to report on. yes, kind of make it clear that we have expectation on it. But where that level isn't really as important, or to define it as is not as important. We will act as if it encompasses all.
Yeah. I mean, I think, this is a very, very good viewpoint. And if we take social scoring, who cares if AI is used or not?
It's bad.
If you have social scoring, it's bad.
It's bad.
Independent of what technology is used, right?
I agree.
It's such a funny, it's a standard comedian act if we start thinking about it. If you do social scoring on your notepad and send it out in an envelope, then it's fine. But if you do it in a computer, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's stupid, right?
Or even if if you do it on a computer, but it's not defined as AI, then it's okay. But if it's defined as AI, then it's bad.
And ultimately, social scoring is bad.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's irrelevant. So that's the definition part. Then we come to a separate detail where I'm really worried. And that is the bureaucratic part.
Right.
And that kind of feeds off a bit on the definition and how we're steering
the
that.
lines.
Yeah, exactly. Because that can get either inflated or deflated. And that is, we need to be very conscious of we're in the 21st century. Let's just please keep it there and not bring in 19th century processes.
Exactly, for the bureaucracy of a digital
realm. Exactly. And we're talking about really advanced things that are reactively learning, changing, adapting on daily, weekly basis in many organizations. We can't be on a level where someone says, please send it in an envelope and we'll review it.
Send it as a PDF file every Friday afternoon.
No, exactly. And we'll review it within the SLA of 3 months. And then we'll come no, we can't do that. And wait, now we have vacation, so it'll be an extra month. No, we can't do that.
It's a stand-up comedy act.
Exactly.
It is a stand-up comedy act.
So here it is, we just need to realize that we're living in a digital age with digital expectations, with digital demands. And here the bureaucracy and control, reporting and auditability needs to live up to that. And it needs to live up to that not only for 27 countries, but for multinationals active across many of those at the same time. So they can't even be talking about national agencies independently working with this, because you need to be able to work with this across nations. And I think
this is the real problem.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's more to see how to, and I'm an optimist, how to find the opportunity to actually find world-class auditability, standardization, and control of something that is really necessary without hindering innovation, progress, efficiency.
But this is the real joke, right? We need the most sophisticated AI to enforce the control mechanisms of the AI Act, so therefore it will not be compliant.
It's so meta. You use AI to make an AI compliant.
Using AI to make AI compliant and control, and then the meta joke is, no, you're not compliant.
Yes, exactly.
But it's actually, I think this is putting the nail on the head, right? Because if we put this not as guidelines or policy, but as regulation, then what is the control mechanism, how will it be enforced? And this is going back to our pet rant around GDPR is a good idea, but the implementation wasn't thought through. And here is really the tricky part, right? So how do we set that up? Because if we do it wrong, and with the bureaucracy joke that you said, it will severely impact Europe. So when people are saying that the AI Act is negatively impacting Europe, it's not about the core philosophies, but it's because of the bureaucracy or whatever it happens that basically makes it impossible to do anything effectively, or with speed at least.
Yeah, exactly. But my question is, who have said that is a given?
No,
exactly. We're still in a position where I would say that if we have enough voices saying, not saying it's bad, not saying it's hard, but saying, great, how do we make it efficient?
Exactly.
And I think that's the narrative that that I hope that we can hear more of, is that how do we make it efficient? How do we make it purposeful? How do we make it modern? We're talking about our advanced technology. How can we make it efficient? Come on, we came to this point to utilize this technology because we want the efficiency. Why not apply that?
But you're flipping the narrative quite a bit here, because the narrative is very easy that we go in and say the AI Act is bad, but if you peel the onion, what is bad? What is really the problem here?
Exactly.
The narrative needs to be more sharp. It's about efficiency and innovation speed not being hindered.
Exactly.
I like it.
Cool. I'm trying to move on because time is
That's
flying
a
by.
good narrative.
But I'm eager to speak about consciousness. Blake Lemonie, the Google engineer, I'm sure you heard about him. He claimed that one of their top chatbot systems or dialogue systems, Lamda, was conscious,
Yes.
sentient, and should potentially have human rights in some way. What's your thought about this?
That's an interesting topic. I like the angle of it that some technology applications, it's so much smarter than many humans. And many humans are so much smarter than many technology applications. And I think here is that we just need to be very conscious that we need to go back of just because a technology is faster or explicit that shows smartness in a certain way, that doesn't directly translate them being a human or seen as a human entity or a sentient entity.
Then
And
chess playing games should be sentient as well, right?
Yeah,
If you just
exactly,
have
and
that
exactly.
kind
And
of
I think
vision.
it's not is we need to be able to. We need to also go back to what do we value ourselves for? Do we value ourselves that we can compute fast, or that we are seeing things in a very intrinsic way, or that we're creative and they're creating DALL-E kind of pictures in a creative way? No. We are humans because we act as humans with our flaws, with our creativity, with our acceptance of divergence, with our acceptance of seeing things in a completely different way, to be able to learn things we've never learned before, to have the uncertainties and the unknowns we have. And I think here is that we need to be able to start we need to both appreciate the wonderful things technology can do, and we're just in the beginning of things. We're just in the start of it. But also be appreciative to the things that are truly human with all its flawness. That's the thing here. We need to accept the flawness we have and how we are imperfect. And that's the part of being human, instead of measuring ourselves towards computation, which is something that is excellent for technology. So even if we start defining something as sentient, fine. That doesn't change the fact it was just human and machine. What will be interesting, though, is that when we start shifting the barrier of what our humans can truly contribute as valuable and what machines can meet us up with a great interface in contributing towards it. When we get chatbots or companions that can truly augment us beyond the creativity we have as humans and fully augment us. So I think it's more to see, instead of us seeing as a replacement, it's about shifting the line of intersection between what us as humans contribute with and what technology can do.
But it boils down to the whole conversation. We've had it on this show before. What is what is truly human consciousness? And are there different types of consciousness? And we were talking about, I remember, a scale almost, right? When we talk. So I think what is consciousness then?
Do we have time to go into that? Or it could be another half an hour, I think.
That's good.
But yeah, it is an interesting topic. But do you think there is a time where there will be an AI system that is sentient and should have human rights? Even though I think most people agree that Lambda is not sentient. But
no, but I think that, yes, we will push that barrier long beyond the point we have now of what we think a machine can do, and will be far more super, being exceedingly better in humans in many, many, many tasks. But still, again, no matter how far we get in our technology development, no matter how far we get in where we kind of draw that line, I think we need to start to value us as humans in a different way than we've done before. Like we can see, let's just simplify this. The value a teacher has in being able to meet young kids and meeting them in their needs in learning and what they need at that given time is invaluable. And that is, I think that it's kind of being able to be real in, like, let's say an elderly person, meeting someone, a caregiver, giving that elderly person exactly what that person need at that given time. That is invaluable human aspects that can be supported or augmented by technology, but it's nothing that it's so hard to really replace or kind of see that a technology would supersede a human. They can do great things in a lot of areas, and that will expand exponentially. But we need to be very conscious about where do we as humans truly contribute value.
Yeah.
And I guess today, at least, it's super easy to see if it's a human or a machine. I mean, it's not a problem today, and I think for many, many years to come, it will be an easy task to tell the difference. But perhaps there will come a time.
Yeah,
perhaps,
exactly. Over time, we will, and I think here is kind of, we will stop seeing the difference between who we're chatting with a chatbot. We'll stop seeing the difference on who we're interacting with over email. We'll stop seeing that. All digital interfaces will more or less kind of go into the gray area of being some technology being on the back end of it. Where we'll see a difference is that we're actually starting valuing these kind of conversations in person, because we actually see the difference there.
Yeah, but I just want to pick up 1 minute on I think was a quite interesting way of looking at this that we had in a previous discussion with the robotics super expert with Fredrik. What's his? Lövgren. And then in the same way as we talk about narrow and general AI, we went on a path of interesting philosophical discussion. What if we define narrow consciousness versus general consciousness? So, because you can define consciousness for a chatbot in relation to a very narrow area that he can actually be conscious about the responses of many of thousands. So he can have a deeper consciousness in responding to that particular question, i.e., narrow consciousness. But to flip that to general consciousness is something completely different. And I think these two concepts go in a very similar line. So what is AI? Replace that with consciousness instead, right? And then I think you could argue that there is narrow and general consciousness, and then
everything becomes easier to reason if you think like that.
If you think like that, it's much more less fluffy. Yeah, because you can think about conscious. A chatbot is conscious in a very narrow space, and he's more conscious than some of the guys working who never worked with that problem before in customer support. But to take that out of his context, and then maybe we don't need to have human rights for narrow consciousness. It's when we reach general consciousness that applies. You like that? That's I think we came up with that. You and me and Fredrik on the spot. I remember that.
It's awesome.
Awesome.
I'd like to move to one topic I know you're very interested in as well, and we really haven't had time to speak about that much, which is AR, VR, and that type of metaverse and how we can come into that. But just connecting then potentially the idea of man versus machine, or what happens if you move into a metaverse. I guess IKEA is also exploring the ideas of building increasingly more effective AR in, I guess, placing furniture in your home or whatnot, right?
Exactly. We've had that progress and development over the last decade.
What's your thinking about metaverse? I listened to Mark Zuckerberg, being on your Rogan show recently, a week ago, and it's really interesting to hear his thoughts. And he has really, really high hopes and believes the metaverse, in the way they view it, will have a huge impact on our society going forward. And to some extent, we are really having a number of metaverses already. So many people are living in the Instagram world or the Facebook world or the Twitter world or whatever. And it's kind of a parallel world in some sense. But that will also become increasingly VR and AR enabled. And at some point, we are getting into a point where a metaverse is potentially not a side universe, but actually potentially more important than the physical world? Or what's your thinking about the metaverse? Do you think the digital metaverse at some point will become more important than the physical world?
I think it is already for many people. That their digital presence and their digital experiences and their digital lives are more important than their physical ones. I think that has augmented for many people during the pandemic. We're already there. We're just having a bit of rough technologies connected to it.
What do you mean with that? I can translate that to, do my kids spend more hours on the phone and in these areas than with me? Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
But it's also that what have happened over the last decade is that we have got more efficient platforms to socialize on, get more efficient platforms to work on, more efficient platforms to live our life, kind of get transactions happening and having information spread and all that.
So if you take a broad dimension of metaverse, when I use Teams, I don't physically meet people in a room anymore.
But you're interacting.
You're
with
interacting.
You're having a social interaction with them. We need to be able to look, as in many other topics, looks beyond the restrictions of technology that we see right now. Let's just stretch that. Let's see that no restriction to technology, no restriction to the limitations we have to the perception of what is real or not. But the true kind of the driving forces of humans, of being social, being interactive, doing work, and doing things. So I think that we've started seeing the trend of it going towards that direction, of being fully immersed into these digital technologies or realities. It's as real as the physical realities. It's just a part of living out your life. Living out your life in terms of work, of socializing, interacting, getting communication abroad and being efficient and kind of getting things done. But it's just in a digital realm. I think that, and of course, depending upon what part of the world you have and access to this kind of technology, it will be different in different parts. And then over time, it will democratize and kind of be available for more. I think that the inherent needs of humans to connect with people and socialize will always be there. I think it will, the presence of, if we call it metaverse, or yes, kind of augmented reality or immersive technologies, it doesn't really matter. I think the enablement of that technology will just expand the horizon way beyond what we see today with social media. Because when you have no thresholds, then you'll just live there and you'll be part of it.
Are you afraid of that, or
no? I think people have needs, and they will just, if their capabilities there and technology is there, it just will happen. There is no hindrance to it. And of course, technology creators will follow that and enable it. So there's like it's a feeding development that kind of builds on each other going forward. What is important though, in this context, you can't hinder it. We'll just progress. Whatever we've seen as like a demo of metaverse is just ugly, but it will be beautiful going forward. It will come to the point where the digital interface will be interchangeable with what you experience in real life. It will come to that point. You will not be able to see the difference between manufactured or real reality, whether that is visual, audio, or haptic. It will disappear. That is just the reality of things, because it's just a matter of efficient technology. That's the point of it. What's important, though, is when you start moving from a physical reality to a digital reality, you will create traction of data. And what is important in this context is, what autonomy do we as humans want of that data? In the physical reality, I can choose to be in this room or not. I can choose to act or not in different shapes and form. But if I'm in a digital reality and I start to shape or do things, every single movement, eye movement, gaze, heartbeat, how I breathe, how I move, everything, every haptic device is registered and collected, and I get a unique digital imprint of what I do and how I do it. The data around that and how that is used is something completely different, because if someone has proprietary right of that, they can shape my world. In the physical realm, I see the world and no one can shape it. But in a digital realm, if everyone has my impact on that virtual reality, they can change it and more or less create either a dreamscape or a nightmare of that. They can choose to impact my decision making or not.
So in a future digital metaverse, the ethics of data and AI will become even more important. Is that correct?
Even more important than the technology in itself. Because it is the guardrails in which we decide of how we want to live our world. In this physical realm that we're living right now, we decide, because the like laws of physics and our ability to take our actions.
A bit more control here.
It's control, but in a digital realm, because of the trace of the data points that are created, we need guardrails to hinder someone else to take control over our being.
Let me see if I get it right with a simple example. If I understand you right, and I think this is really interesting and critical, longer ending topic to dwell on. If I go to Google, the way my digital footprint, so to speak, changes what I see. It changes what advertising I get up. It changes if I go to YouTube. It changes what is pushed in front of me. If I go to Facebook, if I go to LinkedIn, it changes. So when you come to the metaverse perspective, in theory, it could, when I'm out walking and I like surfing, Henrik like surfing, and I buy surf shops or surf things. My street that I walk into in the metaverse will look like a big surf shop, or like a street in Manly, versus you like computers. So your metaverse will look like Tokyo, and they can change that instantly. So you can spin this endlessly.
I'm on the level of, you're in the metaverse. No matter if you're in a relationship, you see a blonde woman at the age of 45, your heartbeat beats one step above. You'll be the target of ads to change your relationship status to that kind of person, because I know that your biological markers like that more.
Yeah, so it's insane when you start thinking about it.
So we're talking about really that it will have data triggers on such a level of granularity
in real time
about yourself that you will shift, you'll be prodded and nudged with decisions beyond your control. Yeah, and human autonomy is out of the window.
And if you put that in the context that you said that we will not be able to distinguish between the digital and the physical world. In the physical world, I choose that I go down that street. Someone cannot change that street or change the advertising on that street or whatever. And if you take that whole if you take in the challenges of the information bubble or whatever you want to talk about happening, opinion bubble, what is it called? Information bubble? Filter bubble. You're living in a filter bubble in metaverse, but it feels real. Yeah, it's mind-blowing.
Exactly, but also someone can steer that, shape it, move it.
That's what I mean.
Exactly. And I think, and it was also trigger it to like trigger oxytocin, dopamine in your hormones, keeping you there, keeping you happy, feeling you. So it's about, this is such a larger context than just about a more cool VR set. It is about kind of our autonomy as humans. And I think their ethics comes into play. How do we create guardrails for that?
Could we go super philosophical now, perhaps?
Let's go deeper.
Last, perhaps, topic.
Good. Thank you.
There is this simulation argument. It's from Nick Boström. I'm not sure if you heard about it.
Yes.
Yeah. So it basically, with 3 arguments, let's see if I can remember them correctly, but they basically say that we more or less have to live in a simulation, in a metaverse somehow, but we can't tell it. I think one of them is basically that either we will kill ourselves before we reach a post-human kind of world where we have a super AI kind of things. So we will die by nuclear war or something. Or there will be a post-human kind of digital world, and they will have no interest in simulating the history. And if that's close to zero, then we're not living in a simulation. But that should be really close to it, because someone in all of future for thousands of years in ahead, at least someone from a museum point of view or something should run some kind of simulation of how did the very stupid people from the 21st century actually live. Or it is actually the case that we are living in a simulation, and that has to be very close to one. So if you go through all of these, you would come to a conclusion that the first 2 arguments, that we will die before, in some kind of catastrophe, either you don't believe that will happen, and it could be sad given the current situation in the world. It's not perhaps close, it's not zero, but let's say that we survive, the current horrific kind of situation with nuclear war or climate change or whatnot. And let's also assume that at least someone in the future will be interested in running some kind of simulation, and they have, computational power that is far, far surpassing anything we have today. We already can see in all the awesome games that we can see that it's very, very close to real world, resolution and quality of the images, that it's really hard even today to say if there's a deep fake or not for an image or a video being displayed, is that real or not? It's really hard even today. Like, imagine 1,000 years from now, it will not be a problem at all to have, it will be super hard to distinguish at least. So that leaves the only remaining conclusion, which is that we should be living in a simulation already. What do you think? Are we?
The assumption of this builds on the idea of logic, and I think that's where it fails. We're not logical as human beings. We do things that are completely erratic. We do not follow the rules of the game in any shape or form.
But perhaps a post-human kind of
can simulate that good enough. Could agree so. But that's only our own. It's only simulating our external expressions, and then we're complex enough to also have an internal world within us. So, anyone that has internal thoughts and a divergence to external actions actually disproves the logic of this one. Because the logic of this one would be that it would also both cater for all external actions and also the internal thought process of us as humans.
But let's imagine, we have the laws of nature that we do have, and more or less you can write it down on a single page of paper, from quantum mechanics to general relativity. And as long as you can simulate those, laws of nature, why shouldn't we be able to simulate the human mind or the brain or people and our thoughts and everything?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where kind of you can most probably simulate the external actions of the world in some shape or form if you would have massive, unimaginable computer power. But if you then take it one step further and think that I have thoughts that I do not act, that divergence means that the high probability that the rest of humankind does the same thing. And that divergence...
Do you think it's possible to simulate the human mind? Even if you have thoughts that you don't act upon and you have a consciousness and an unconscious part of the brain, shouldn't all of that be possible to simulate, you think?
It could possibly do so, but it leaves enough room for the thought process that if I think differently and act differently, then maybe the remaining billions of people do the same, and then there's at least a risk or an assumption that we will not be in a completely controlled simulation.
I don't see the logic there, sorry. Could you elaborate a bit more?
It's more to see kind of that you can't prove it. You can't prove that you're in that you're a simulation or not. But you can leave an essence of doubt. The doubt is that as long as I have a divergence between my line of thoughts and the reality, then it may be so that billions of others have it also. And that leaves it to the idea that if that complexity exists, then there is uncertainty to the reality we have in front of us. Because if they have a divergence between thought process and actions, then...
If you can simulate, let's say, okay, sorry to linger on this, but I think these kind of discussions is funny. Let's say you can simulate a single atom. Let's say that string theory is the theory to rule them all. The actual, I don't believe that's true, but let's say that string theory is the one that actually mixes quantum mechanics and general relativity, and you are able to simulate how a single photon, electron, neutron, whatnot works. Then, if you are able to do that properly, you should be able to simulate how molecules work, how cells work, how neurons in the head work, how a human work, right?
Yeah. And then again, it is also assuming that we're a unity of one, because and then we're not only a unity of one, we're also a unity of our past history of billions of people that have been, because each of us have a separate experience. Each of us have a
simulation could be running for billions of years,
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Right?
So it could go that far. There's just a higher probability that there is, because we can experience, like here and now, we can experience that divergence between the two. So there's a higher
experience between what?
Like our own thoughts and our actions that is happening in the outside of the world that we are manifesting and seeing.
Yeah.
And because we see that divergence between our own thoughts in our head.
How do you know you see that? I mean, it could just be simulation, similar to the Matrix,
Yeah, exactly. But it could be that divergence, and I think that it just leaves a strain of challenge that there is more to this world than I see. I think that's the thing. It's a doubt. And that doubt is, for me, is enough to know that I don't think we're in a simulation.
Okay, interesting.
Do you think we're in a simulation, Anders? Bottom line, you've been driving that theory hard. So are you living in a matrix?
I think these arguments are really, really logical, and I can't find a strong argument why they are false. So
therefore, you're living in a simulation?
It's a high probability, yes.
We need to close the show, Neo.
Pull the plug. Awesome. With that, it's been an honor to have you here. I'm hoping you can stay on for some time, Giovanni, and continue the philosophical and whatnot discussions after work. Yeah,
it's been my pleasure. It's a great conversation. It's all across the board, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.